So the first question I have for you is how and where did you find wrestling, and in what way could you say it's impacted your life so far?
So freshman year, I was at a school in Knoxville, Knox Catholic, and I needed a ride home from school. And so I asked one of my sister's friends, and he said he could take me, but it would be after a wrestling tournament. So I said, sure. I'd never had an experience with wrestling, but I sat down waiting for my ride, and I saw the wrestling tournament or the duel, and I wanted to do it.
Mhm.
I saw the Knox Catholic guys pinning people, and I wanted to be out there doing it. So yeah, and then it's impacted me really now all of high school and into college. So it started off, I joined the male wrestling team at Knox Catholic toward the end of their season, and so I was really just practicing with them. And then I ended up coming to Baylor as a sophomore, and I started the girls program here.
Mhm.
And I mean, I love it. It's what I want to do. It's what I enjoy doing. And now I'll be wrestling at the Coast Guard Academy.
Well, congratulations on your recent commitment.
Thank you.
But you mentioned how it's just a sport that you can get attached to, and I agree with that in a lot of ways because and actually, I said this earlier in another interview. This sport, it's a hard sport to love at first, but once you learn to love the sport, I just feel like you can't let it go because it connects to so many different aspects of life. I think in the ways of work ethic and putting in the time and dedication, and just also the adversity it puts you through. I think really sets a foundation for going about other challenges later on in life.
I completely agree. You learn so many life skills just going through one hard practice that you know if you get through it, then you can really do anything. You have the mental state you need to face any challenge.
Oh, absolutely. And I think and you mentioned those hard practices, which it's funny you mentioned that because that's kind of a saying I look back on a lot, where in those very difficult practices, even I feel like 10 years from now, those are the moments you look back and think, I'm proud of that because those are the moments I had to find myself and persevere through something that was challenging at the moment.
Most definitely. You're there with your wrestling partner and you want to quit, you're done, but
Mhm.
they're helping you through it, you're getting through it, and you feel better when you do.
I mean, that's part of the glory of the sport in a way, and there's plenty of examples of that. But so kind of going off that question, so when you arrived at the Baylor school, you made a pitch to the school's administration to form a girls wrestling team. And initially that pitch was denied. What kept you motivated to continue working towards your goal and working to get that team formed?
So after I initially started over the summer talking to Coach Kendall of, hey, this is something I want to do. Is it possible? And at first, it was just going to be me wrestling with the men. But after that, after the pitch was brought up to administration, they shut that down completely. Um, would not be something they would allow. And so I then switched to what if I just started a girls' team?
Right.
And for that, I had to find one other girl, and which I was able to. But what drove me to do that is one, I didn't like hearing no.
Mhm.
It was something I wanted to do, and when you want something, you're more determined to get it.
Oh yeah.
And so, really, just because of my want and my love for the sport, even though I've been doing it for such a little time, that's it's what drove me to keep fighting for a different answer.
Well, it's a one of a kind story and one that just the when you look at the huge picture of it, you take a incredibly um, decorated team like Baylor and a school in general, and to be able to make a stand and make history by getting that women's wrestling team formed, and especially at the turn of the decade with girls wrestling increasing by the year,
Mhm.
and increasing at a vast rate due to many different influences. It was perfect timing, in my opinion, for that to happen, and it is remarkable to see.
I could not agree more. Women's wrestling has grown so much just in the past year and across the whole United States. I mean, there are so many more opportunities for women now than there were 5 years ago.
Agreed in that regard. Now, after taking on the school's administration and getting them to agree to that clause and to form a girls wrestling team, what was your initial feeling after hearing that response that they accepted the idea and they were on board with it?
Um, I was overjoyed, excited that they were letting me move forward with this. But honestly, I was a little nervous. I knew Baylor as a wrestling team was they had so many awards. They were amazing.
Mhm.
And stepping into that wrestling room, I didn't know that much. I had been wrestling for maybe a month. And so I was pretty nervous at first, just, oh my goodness, I'm actually here. I made it happen. But after that initial shock and seeing that the guys, they were fine with us being in there, Autumn and I, and they understood that we were going to do our practice in the corner of the mat.
Right.
And so, I mean, it was overwhelming in an aspect of, oh my goodness, I made it happen. But also, I made it happen. And so I had to then do it.
I could imagine it was finally seeing the initial result of it. It was probably a moment of clarity in a sense, realizing that you were able to make that happen and open a new opportunity for girls wrestling and girls wrestling for that school, extremely popular and widely looked upon school. Um, like I said, I can imagine that it felt a great moment of success
Yes.
initially at that time. Now, kind of staying on the same topic and going into that first full year that that there was the girls team, kind of in detail, what was that first year like? Just whether it be in the practice room or in general of having that girls wrestling team.
So the first year, Autumn and I, we didn't really participate in the game warm up aspect of practice, but
Hmm.
then we would go onto the mat. We would have our little corner that we were allowed to practice in, and the coach would be demonstrating something in the middle. We'd all go back to our spot, and Autumn and I, we were not on the same level as the boys, and so we were not picking up on things as quickly as expected, I guess.
Hmm.
But we would raise our hand, and one of the coaches would come over, show us what to do. And that's how the whole year went until February when we had individual regionals. And then I qualified for state then. And we were moved into the middle school wrestling room. And we were given our own coach. And Shaq Van Duzen came out of retirement to also help us. So then after that, we were in the middle school wrestling room. We had two coaches, and we it was a bit more focused on what
Hmm.
we were able to do and where we needed to improve instead of just having following the boys practice. And so then I made it to or I went to state and I did not place. But after I got back, the boys team recognized that okay, they're actually serious. They wanted to be here and they're going to put in the work.
Mhm.
And so I feel like there was a shift after that to where it was more of a mutual respect, not just a they're there.
Right.
And so I feel like that changed the environment a little of now it's more equal.
Well, I agree with you saying that because that kind of 2021 2022 season, if you look at the state duels and you look at the state tournament, um, for the girls wrestling, that was the first year they had the state dual championships for the girls division.
Mhm.
What was that year? So I think to be able to qualify and wrestle there in the Cow Palace, even though I'll admit it's not the most attractive venue in the world.
It's something.
It's it's definitely a an interesting place, that's for sure. But to be there on that stage and just kind of really test the waters, and even more than that, I definitely think would be a huge confidence booster going into that next season.
Mhm. It definitely did give me more motivation and drive to keep working at getting better as I knew it was something I could do. I just had to put in the work and the dedication to get there.
Right. And with good coaches by your side, like Coach Holland and
Mhm.
um, Shaq Van Duzen, who, from the stories I've heard, and I'm grateful to have met him personally and have had conversations with him. If you're looking for somebody that's willing to, break stuff down, have notes, and really kind of go into the fine details thing, I think there's no better than Shaq.
After every tournament, he will hand us our stack of notes from each match with everything that happened and what we need to work on for next practice. And it is probably one of my most favorite moments and one I will miss.
Oh, and I can imagine that it's just it's one of a kind because it shows his care towards the sport and his care towards his wrestlers as well, going through that much time to make those notes and all of that and provide that different perspective
Yes.
and help in that regard. Now, your senior year, you capped off by winning your first state championship, avenging your loss to, I believe it was
Mm-hmm.
Brooklyn Long, correct?
Yes.
Of Independence. You avenged your loss to her earlier in the season and beat her in the state finals. After finally accomplishing that goal, and especially, like I said, make avenging the loss from earlier, what was that feeling like after getting that victory?
I was in complete shock. I did not register that it happened. The ref blew the whistle and she got off of me, and I just looked at coach with a look of what? And it didn't hit me until probably a minute or two later after my hand was raised that I just did that and I created history and it is set in stone. And so really there were so many emotions. I was overwhelmed. I was so excited and so overjoyed, thankful to the people who were supporting me and that were there. And it was just amazing.
I think, especially in a moment like that, it's really where all the hard work, all the sprints, all the drilling, everything like that really comes to fruition, like truly. And you mentioned it taking a minute or two to register, and I can imagine so that after a little while, it clicked in your like, oh wait a minute, I won a state championship. It's like all it all came together at the end of the day, and obviously, like you mentioned earlier, with going to wrestling for the Coast Guard, there's a lot more wrestling opportunities down the road, and but I think to be able to cap off your high school career in that way and really, like you said, make your mark in history is just very impressive to say the least.
Well, thank you.
No problem. Now, all in all, now that you're graduating soon and going off to wrestle, what does Baylor girls wrestling mean to you?
Really, it's been my family for the past 3 years. The girls on the team, there's some of the closest friends I have, and leaving it is going to be hard because it's the family I've had for the past 3 years since I've been at Baylor. I've always been able to go into Coach Scott. He was the first coach we were assigned. I've always been able to go into his classroom and just rant about anything. He's always there. I've been able to call up Shaq if I need him and just talk to him. And so leaving that is going to be a shock in itself,
Hmm.
just of they aren't right by my side anymore. I still would be able to get in touch with them if I need them, but they won't be right at my disposal. And so it's going to be a change. And girls wrestling, I mean, I'm so glad that's going to continue when I'm gone. We have our own coach.
Right.
So Coach Holland is trying to grow the program. We're trying to bring more girls in. And so I'm excited to see how it grows and where it ends up.
So all in all, you're looking for that program to continue to grow and continue to make strides and furthermore add their name to history.
Yes, I want them to be side by side with the men's team. So when people think of Baylor wrestling, they don't just think of the boys team, they
Mhm.
also think of the girls. And I want us to be able to go to all tournaments, take home the team points. I want to be able to have duels and host them because right now we don't have enough girls to have a duel.
Right.
And so I want more girls to come in and fall in love with the sport like I did.
Well, I think those are great admirations in that sense. And like I mentioned earlier, with the sport growing so much, I mean, it is very, very likely to go in that path, given the influences that are continuing to help. God, I might sound like a broken record, but grow the sport in a positive and more adaptive way than it was, say, 15, 20 years ago. You could even say 10, 15 years ago in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Now, once high school ends and you go off to the Coast Guard and wrestle for there, what's the plan after that? What's college wrestling? What are your goals for that moving forward?
Really, I just on the college level, I want to develop my skills and become a more confident wrestler. I will be on the men's team there, and so I will have the opportunity to earn a spot on the lineup, but I will have to work for it.
Right.
And so hopefully I'll be able to earn a spot, but I know it's going to take a lot of hard work, a lot of effort, but that will be the end goal. After I graduate from the Coast Guard, I right away I wouldn't have really an opportunity to wrestle because I would have a 5 year commitment.
Mhm.
And so hopefully during that time I can still keep up my physical ability and maybe practice some. But at the moment, college level is where it would end right now.
Right. And it's always remarked as a big shift, especially in wrestling, to go from wrestling in high school to wrestling in college.
Yes.
And it really is a different world just because the the idea at that point that you have wrestlers that have been competing all over the country. And that can be the same for high school in a sense, but I mean college, the practices become harder and
Mm-hmm.
everything just really amplifies, but also, iron sharpens iron in a sense. So the exposure there should be extremely beneficial. And from what I've heard, college wrestling exposure in general has always proved to have its benefits in many different ways, whether that be on the mat, off the mat, or wherever.
Yes. And I know at the Coast Guard, even outside the wrestling room, I will still get those skills, but even more so in the wrestling room because of the hard work you have to put in to make progress and the
Mhm.
dedication and perseverance you need.
So that actually is a really good point. That dedication, and work ethic is able to carry over to the Coast Guard, and I imagine provide confidence and a strong mental code, knowing that I can get through some of the toughest challenges out there.
Yes. um 7 weeks before I'll start the academic school year, I'll have swap summer, so it's basic training boot camp.
Mhm.
And so I know during that time, even that will prepare me for being in the wrestling room and going through a hard practice, because I'll be getting yelled at all day, have to push my body physically and mentally. And so it's a direct correlation to what I'll have to do in the wrestling room.
Right. Now, it may seem like an early question with the Coast Guard on the horizon, no pun intended. I kind of realized what I did there. Would you ever consider reverting back to coaching the sport?
I If I am able to develop my skills enough to where I can share with others what I have learned, I would love that. If I can make somebody else fall in love with the sport and enjoy it the way I have and give them that experience, I would.
Well, glad to hear that, and best of luck, all in all, in the Coast Guard and through the rest of the school year. And thank you for joining me for this interview. It's been awesome to get to interview you.
Thank you
And
for having me.
my pleasure. It's